Hello, and thank you for joining today's webinar. We're excited to have the Josh Bersin Company back today to share their latest insights on the consumer packaged goods industry from their Global Workforce Intelligence project powered by Eightfold AI. If you have any questions during today's webinar, please put them in the chat widget located at the bottom of your console. And if you experience any technical difficulties, you can also place those in the chat and our team will help troubleshoot. With that, I'll pass it over to our speakers, Mertens and Stella Ioannidou.
Thank you, Callie. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Delighted to be here with you today. Thank you for joining us. I'm Janet Mertens. I'm thrilled to be joined today by my friend and colleague, Stella. We're going to have a great session talking through some of the key findings from our recent research. But let me just introduce myself really quickly and pass it over to Stella to do the same, and we'll jump right in. I am Janet Mertens. I am the Senior Vice President of Research here at the Josh Bersin Company. I lead our research agenda and direct our research team on all things talent and HR. And I've been in the HR space for 20 plus years, we'll leave it at that, 20 plus years studying talent and people practices and HR models. And I'm just delighted to join you all today and unpack the findings from our latest research on the consumer products and packaged goods industry. Stella, why don't you introduce yourself?
Global greetings, everyone. My name is Stella Ioannidou, the weird surname that's all Greek to you. You guessed it. I'm dialing in from Greece. I'm the Director of Research at the Josh Bersin Company, leading the Global Workforce Intelligence project for the consumer packaged goods industry. And I often joke with Janet that I have the best job in the world because I get paid to satisfy my professional curiosity and help some organizations along the way. Really excited to share findings here with you, but first let's do a quick review of the agenda. Janet?
Thanks, Stella. All right. Okay, so listen, for the first 10-15 minutes, I'm going to just spend a little bit of time talking about what's going on in the market, kind of talk through some of the trends that we are seeing and what we're studying and observing in the market, just give that high-level context to all of you. And then Stella is really going to take us into the CPG industry and show you what we've uncovered through our analysis of Eightfold data around what's happening in CPG talent, what the challenges are, and what companies are doing well. And so we're going to spend the bulk of our time there, and we will have time for questions and answers, questions at the end of the session. So if you do have questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A on your platform, and we will get to those near the end. Okay. So what's happening in the market? I mean, listen, it's been a 15, 16-year economic cycle that we have just seen tremendous growth throughout, and we are starting to see a slowdown and some uncertainty on the horizon. You know, this has been just an incredible last few years. You know, the pressures of the pandemic, of the move to remote or hybrid work, the market, sort of the market slowdowns and the inflation rates climbing has really created this perfect storm, as we talk about it at Bersin, to put pressure on organizations going forward. And what we are starting to look at is what's going on in the labor market. What are the results of that? What are the implications of the business context on the labor market? And we are still continuing to track just an incredible shortage of labor. And this really is, you know, it has been going on for some time, right? We've talked about labor shortages for the last few years, but we really are watching as this is now affecting every industry, and it's affecting every type of role. And what you see on this chart, and this is a US chart, but it really is a kind of a lens for the global perspective. You can see on the left, and I know it's a bit of an eye chart, but the the data that we're watching shows that there are shortages of labor or people or talent in nearly every industry and across all types of roles. So we are not talking about any particular role in specifically. Certainly, tech talent has been a challenge for many years, but we're also seeing clinical talent shortages, massive shortages post-pandemic. We're seeing salespeople and retail shortages on the front lines, truck driver shortages. I mean, these are really global challenges. And there are a number of reasons for this. I mean, we are looking at, a dropping birth rate across the globe. We are seeing massive numbers of baby boomers retiring. We're seeing, across generations, employees are leaving the workforce. So organizations are really facing this labor and skills shortage at a time when growth is critical. Couple of other trends that we are observing in the market, and I love this slide because it really shows an evolution, a social evolution of what employees and workers have experienced as it comes, as it pertains to what their career looks like. And as you kind of track across this chart, what you're seeing here is the evolution of how we define our career. So back, in the 1950s, 1960s, the company was the career, right? We went in, we were employed by the same company, usually for our entire tenure, right? These were lifetime careers in an organization with movement through that organization, usually up the ladder, and that was the focus for for most employees to stay in a single company. Things changed in the 80s and 90s as the internet was introduced and companies started to go online. The career became an individual piece, right? It became about an individual choosing what company or where to go. And really, in some ways, this is where job change really became a trend. And then it became about the work you were doing. So where were you working? What kind of projects are you working on? What were employees thinking about in terms of the purpose-driven work they were doing? And that's how careers have been defined up until almost a couple of years ago. What we're now seeing in the market is that employees and workers and organizations too are recognizing that your skills are truly the red thread of your career, right? So skills are now the currency by which careers are measured. And so for employees now and for employers, the skills that employees or workers are building or gaining or developing inside your organization matter not just to your organization, but to the employees themselves. And that's an important shift. Another key trend that we're looking at, and it ties to this idea of skills, is what's happening in the industry, right? What's happening in industries? How is technology truly reinventing industries? And we've seen a lot of change over time from the sort of the internet era, where companies took their services online, right? And then in the start of the internet era, early 2000s, late 90s, late 80s, early 90s. I'm getting my numbers all mixed up here. We saw that companies were really looking to adopt digital solutions, get their services online. And then that became a real push for digital transformation. So through the early probably 2000s, I would say that digital transformation really took off. Companies knew that they needed to go mobile first. There was shift to the cloud. If you think about the major ERP, HR ERP systems, everything was moving towards that digital domain. COVID-19 hit, of course, the global pandemic, and disruption was sort of everywhere for industries. The products that industries made, the ways that we delivered those products as industries, the ways that consumers embraced our products changed dramatically over the course of the pandemic. But now what we're looking at is, on the hopefully other side of that, is the what we call digital or sorry, industry reinvention. And this is really where industries are starting to take stock of what has changed and what is now shifting for the industry. So the lines are now blurring between industries. Before, retail or pharma or manufacturing were very, very specific industries and very sort of well bordered. What we're now starting to see, and this is part of the reason that we are doing this research, is that industries are changing dramatically, and a lot of this is due in part to the technologies that have exploded over the past few years. So here's a few examples, and Stella's going to take you through the CPG industry in particular. So I won't spoil for that one, but in retail, retail has really shifted, and there's a great chart here I want to show you from brick and mortar stores to everything being online to thinking about pharmacy. And if you think about retail, the superstore concept has really taken off. Retail is getting into financial services. If we think about e-commerce, if you look at telco is now getting into healthcare. TELUS has recently purchased, mental health platforms. The auto industry has gone through massive change, going from pure manufacturing right through to electric vehicles and battery design and software engineering. There's a great kind of phrase that I think about the auto industry that really brings this to life, and it's that cars were once cars with a computer. Now cars are truly computers on wheels. So every industry is reinventing itself, and that has caused organizations to really have to think differently about talent. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that for some time, companies in an industry could be fairly certain that they were pulling from particular pools of talent. The talent stayed in the industry. You may compete against others in your industry, but you knew that you were looking in certain places. Now, employees are moving industries, they are shifting, they are on the move, and what companies are having to deal with now are competitors for talent from entirely new industries. So what does it all mean for HR? We are looking at HR differently now going forward. This chart, I love this chart because it really shows how HR functions now need to be interconnected. So to support and cultivate talent and bring talent into the organization and keep and unlock that talent, HR is realizing that gone are the days of siloed functions that are, that ne'er shall talk to each other. And if you look at some of the examples here, when we think about this, and we're going to talk more about how we operationalize this, but if you think about some of this, when we think about TA and hiring now, there are simply not enough people to fill the jobs that companies need filled. So now companies are starting to think about gig and contract workers. Well, gig and contract workers might have once been owned by procurement or by the business lines themselves. And when you think about gig and contract workers, well, that ties back to employee experience. So now when you think about employee experience, it's no longer just about your full-time employees. You're really thinking about what does that experience look like for your entire total workforce. And then, of course, when you're thinking about employee experience, you're thinking about workforce planning, right? How do you create experiences for every segment of your workforce and continue to be agile and allow for growth or shrinkages when you need to scale up or scale down? And then, of course, diversity and inclusion comes into play here as you build a flexible workforce. How are you ensuring that you are creating an inclusive environment with diversity across your workforce and in your leadership? And then, of course, that ties back to pay and rewards. What are the components of your reward strategy that allow you to go to market differently and find the talent you need from these non-traditional or new talent pools? So everything in HR is connected now. And what companies are starting to realize is that the technology layer now needs to enable that that systemic approach to HR. And you know, this chart, and I won't spend a ton of time on it, but the HR tech stack is getting more and more complicated. And we talk to organizations all the time about how they are knitting together their HR tech stack, whether it's TA technology, whether it's, you know, core HR systems, whether it's employee experience platforms. And, you know, at the end of the day, at JBC, what we are thinking about is truly what are the touch points in your HR tech stack that employees, managers, leaders are connected with, the candidates, job seekers, right? Every piece of your HR tech stack is now an employee-facing technology that employees and managers are interacting with. And then tying this all together, and you see this green line here, and I'm gonna break this down for you. We call it the talent intelligence layer. How can companies take all of this massive data from all of these systems and make sense of it? How do you track your internal and external data about skills, about compensation, about talent, and how do you make sense of that? So this shift to talent intelligence has been a really important trend for leading companies. And this is really the heart of what we're talking about today. We're working very closely with Eightfold, who has just billions of data points around jobs and skills and workers. Companies who are getting this right are really thinking about the data available to them. And so the talent intelligence database has now taken on a very important role in the HR tech stack. And this is really where you get meaning from all of these different data points and different insights, right? So we're talking about internal data about your own workforce, whether it's the skills you have or the skills you need. We're talking about the roles and the job descriptions that you have in-house. But it's also external data. What's happening in the market? What are the skills that are most important in the market with your competitors, with competitors outside of your industry? What are the credentials or the disciplines that matter most going forward? What kind of pay and compensation and rewards trends are occurring in the industry that you're in and outside of your industry, and where is talent moving to, right? What are the ins and outs of talent, both inside your organization and in the market in general? Which brings us to the Global Workforce Intelligence Project. Why are we studying this? Well, for all of the reasons I just talked about. About a year ago, we at the Josh Bersin Company and Eightfold, really had this idea that as we watch these themes and trends unfold, and as we see that, industries are converging, we really wanted to understand what's going on at an industry level. And as we started to do the work of studying in detail industries like healthcare and banking and now consumer products, we noticed that each industry is truly experiencing the forces at play in different ways and really grappling with very unique challenges. Now, I want to give Stella the mic here to take us through what we found in consumer product packaged goods, but let me just share a little bit more about how we are coming to all of this, these key insights. When we took a look at Eightfold's global talent intelligence, this is a massive set of data from external sources that really give a sense of what's happening with skills, what skills are on the rise, what skills are declining, where are skills linked, what skills are adjacent to each other. We knew that there was, a massive set of insights that we could draw from this. So we brought that data set together with our own data from the Josh Bersin Company, where we've been studying the people practices that actually matter and drive impact in organizations. So we look at talent acquisition, we look at employee experience, learning and development, org design, and all of those functional areas in HR that are now merging. We brought that to bear as well, along with our own expertise and our own conversations with hundreds of CHROs and HR leaders, and reviews through our wide network. And so this data-based approach allowed us to really pull out some incredible insights and incredible metrics for industries to help HR leaders like yourselves make sense of what's going on. Now, this is an example from banking, but it's just a great example of the kinds of insights that we are going to be unlocking with you today and unpacking. And this is around, what are the clusters of jobs that matter most? Where are companies in CPG truly struggling, or where are they successful? What are the companies that are just thriving? What are they doing differently around skills and skills reskilling? How are they looking at career pathways and growth inside the organization and mobility? And that, that brings us to CPG. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Stella for you to take us through, Stella, all of the incredible findings that we have uncovered in the consumer packaged goods industry, and how this industry is really transforming and what's working well.
Thanks so much, Janet, and thanks for the great intro. As Janet explained, we're seeing the story of transformation to reinvention across all industries. And for CPG, for the consumer packaged goods space in particular, the gurus of manufacturing, the gurus of supply chain, the type of organizations that know very well how to build things, how to have their factories all set up, how to do other maintenance production. We're now seeing additional areas going into their daily operations. We're seeing Internet of Things and robotics and process automation disrupting the way that these organizations used to operate. We're seeing increased need, and we will dig a little bit later on, of satisfying consumer demands with our shifting, with our more and more consumers are interested in sustainable products and transparency through their products, and having a personalized relationship with their product manufacturers. So what used to be an industry all about manufacturing things now is transforming into a hybrid that's a little bit of a retailer and a little bit of a service provider to their consumers. And the CPG industry is, at least in our eyes, is let's say, given the business impossible task to, at the same time, address the implications of the pandemic in their daily operations. Remember, the majority of CPG organizations, especially during the lockdowns, have seen their supply chain heavily disrupted. And consumers, meanwhile, have been trading down, have been more selective. They prefer more digital options, and they're not buying as much as they used to. And they're very selective in what they buy. They consider sustainability a core part of their buying decision. And meanwhile, CPGs are, let's say, in a complicated relationship with retailers. So retailers used to be CPG companies' distribution, let's say, networks. But now that retailers are going more and more into white labeling, they're actually becoming competitors. They're placing their products next in line to the CPG products. And the dynamic of this market relationship it's shifting. So on top of these challenges, CPG companies are actually expected to consistently manufacture the best quality products at the right price, fit for the consumer needs, and distribute it through the most effective channel at the right time, while considering all the changes in technological solutions and options that are now available to them, and while trying to, let's say, create a new relationship with their consumers. You see, the old, let's say, way of doing business in consumer packaged goods as an industry was mostly linear. So CPG companies used to manufacture things, wholesalers used to distribute them, or be the middleman between them and the distributor, and then the retailers were the main channel through which the products reach their consumer. This was a linear value chain, right? The CPG companies used to just create, move, and sell goods, no direct link to consumers, and at the same time, no insight on consumer preference unless someone from those who had a direct relationship with the consumers actually gave them the data. In most cases, that those would be the retailers. However, the new operating model, the new value chain of consumer packaged goods is no longer linear. It's actually circular. We're seeing more and more the need for CPG companies to create a circular, responsive system that no longer relies on retailers to hold that relationship with their consumers, but actually is directly linked through the distributors or through the manufacturing site in itself. So you understand how this is a major business transformation story, not just in the way that products are moved and sold, but in the types of new capabilities that are required to be and to remain in the business. And if we were to, let's say, summarize the highlights of the business part of the story, is that CPG companies are now pressured to rethink how they do business. All the while, other players like retailers and CPG startups are gaining market share, and we will see how this affects CPG companies in a little bit, and making R&D and innovation to ensure that they're creating the right product at the right time, distributed at the right price through the right channel, even more significant. But things do not just stop at that layer, let's say the business layer. This entire new shift of the business story actually affects the talent story. We're seeing that those organizations who actually have the right skills to tackle this have a competitive advantage in the market. And we're seeing more and more how, let's say, the so-called war on talent is very prevalent in the consumer packaged goods industry as well. And we will be introducing a set of skills that we would call consumer delight skills that are the differentiators for CPG companies who are great at this. And we will revisit how the pace-setter CPG organizations, those organizations who figured out ways around this, actually have a very unique talent footprint. So if we were to summarize the 4 findings of our, let's say, study on consumer packaged goods, it would be that the majority of CPG companies that we studied, and we actually run the numbers on this, actually lack the talent required to design these right products to their consumers. And the companies who are great at this are the ones who implement systemic HR solutions that enable them to bring in and grow the talent that is able to generate the consumer delight, to maintain this direct relationship with their consumers and ensure that it's a fruitful one. And pace-setter companies have a very, very unique talent mix. They have very unique roles in play, very unique skills in play. We'll see in a bit exactly how that looks like so that you can start to reflect how that compares to your organization. And of course, we've reached a point of maturity in the market where we can no longer rely on our gut to make such decisions. We actually need the numbers, we need the talent intelligence practice, we need the ways and the methodology to generate effective decision making that is data driven and heavily informed by what's going on, not only from within the organization, but also from the labor market at large. So remember our first finding, we said the majority of CPG companies are actually not ready to deliver the right products for their consumers. We examined the existing skills in all talent quadrants for the CPG industry, and we were able to uncover that in all, let's say, 5 major pillars of business transformation for CPG organizations, which is, are they able to sustain a digital supply chain? Are they able to offer transparent and sustainable products to their consumers? Can they go directly to their consumers? Do they take advantage of the technological landscape that's now evolving, like Internet of Things and robotics? And do they rely on AI to predict not only which machine is going to break down, but what is the next best product for consumers? So with the help of the Eightfold AI data set, we actually saw that the majority of companies still rely on skills that are either stable or declining. And you will see that on the digital supply chain part, let's say they're further advanced, and this is the outcome of the pandemic, because the first thing that they had to solve, CPG companies had to solve during the pandemic, was how to keep their supply chain, let's say, value uninterrupted, or how to minimize the interruption. So a lot of steps were made towards that direction, but the other areas remain largely unexplored, not due to lack of interest, but due to lack of skills and talent. Meanwhile, remember when we said that there are other players in the market that are gaining competitive advantage because they have a very different talent footprint? For example, CPG startups are types of organizations who are, of course, smaller, leaner, but what actually sets them apart is that they invest significantly more time in research and innovation to ensure that they are creating let's say, a very core consumer offering that will attract the preference of consumers. Yes, they invest about 6 times more in terms of budgeting and marketing, advertising, and CPG companies invest 6 times more in marketing and advertising than R&D. So they focus a lot on, how we package the product, but not how much of that product is still relevant, or how frequently we change our product line. Whereas smaller, more agile CPG startups actually dedicate 3 times more talent on R&D, and therefore they are able to more swiftly disrupt the traditional market. And this is where we take a step back, following our Global Workforce Intelligence Project methodology, and we say, okay, why is this so? We've seen the data, we've seen the analysis. What can we tell about the actual people practices, the actual people solutions that are currently at play on CPG, and how this relates to the problem at hand? Does it really solve it? So the first part of our analysis was around recruitment. We did see that CPG companies are actually very aware of this challenge that they're faced with, that they need to gain or grow new skills. And many of them are actually trying to gain these skills through recruitment. We've seen a significant increase both in job postings and advertised wage for roles related to technology, to data analytics, and to marketing. However, it seems that it's not really top of mind. There is interest, but the majority of active CPG job postings still revolve around keeping the old business model working. They're looking for more people in merchandising, in warehousing, in food and safety, in good manufacturing processes, over that of the skills related to are we sure that we're creating and we're researching enough for the right product that our consumers want. And of course, manufacturing will never go away. This part of the business will always remain pivotal, but we would expect to see an emphasis on these roles, at least cut the top 10, ranks on the job posting activity. And then we wonder, okay, why is that so? Why are we seeing this type of interest, but still reserved? Is it perhaps there is lower maturity in people practices, or HR maturity, maturity in HR practices across the industry? And this is where we dig into the Josh Bersin Company body of knowledge, and we are actually able to run the numbers for the industry and compare for each of the 4 quadrants of our 4R framework how mature this industry is compared to all other industries. And you will see that the green bar that reflects CPG is actually higher in all cases compared to the rest of the industry. So it's not a matter of low maturity. It's not a matter that we cannot, or we're not advanced, or we don't know how to do it. And this is where you actually need a deeper dive on the numbers to be able to understand and uncover what's going on and what is it really that sets pace-setter CPG organizations apart from the rest of the market. Because if everyone's maturity is, let's say, above the market, why are some organizations still achieving better results at creating and maintaining a deeper relationship with their consumer compared to others? And this is where you need talent intelligence. You need to dive deeply into what roles are at play, what skills are at play, which roles are declining and are not going to be around in, let's say, 5 or 10 years. So it's no use trying to develop them. Or which skills are emerging, and we need to ensure that we are either upskilling or we are hiring for this. And what type of solutions and what type of career pathways, for example, can we build to ensure that we're transitioning people from declining roles to rising roles? So this is actually the type of analysis that goes behind every global workforce intelligence project. And this is the what I promised you in the beginning. This is the first part of what sets pace-setter CPG companies apart from their competitions. And they have three distinct characteristics. The one's about roles, the other one's about skills, and the third one's about systemic people practices. So on roles, we have seen that pace-setter CPG companies have significantly more people in our research-related roles and more people in technology and transformation, but especially in research roles. Let's say a pace-setter CPG company has 30 times more people in R&D, especially dedicated, ensuring that we're researching the right product. We know what we need, what the consumer needs, and we're actually looking to see what's the next best offering from us. So 31.1 is the exact multiplier, and it's the biggest multiplier we've seen throughout our GWI industry studies, and we've had 3 so far. So on top of that, CPG pace-setter organizations have significantly more people in production roles, of course, but they're different types of roles because the majority of these organizations have largely automated their production lines. So they have different type of production roles, and significantly 2 times less people in business to business administration roles. Why? Because they focus a lot on business to consumer. Therefore, a big portion of their B2B has shifted towards that new type of, let's say, business value chain. So this is in terms of skills. Key core takeaway here: significantly more people in technology transformation and an emphasis on R&D. In terms of skills, significantly higher prevalence of skills related to technology transformation and consumer delight. More than 2 times more people with skills related to predictive analytics, machine learning, data science. You're seeing R, you're seeing Python, machine learning, IT service management. But it's not just a tech thing. Significantly more skills related to how do we analyze the organization? How do we transform the way that we work? How do we improve the way our processes are run? How do we manage change across the organization? And last but not least, significantly more consumer delight skills, which are skills related to having a direct relationship with your consumer, ensuring that your consumer is satisfied with your product, planning events, ensuring that the consumers are actually served the proper way, and that product development is done in the way that aligns with both what you can manufacture and what consumers actually are willing to buy. And last but not least, we're seeing that pace-setter CPG organizations adopt a striking balance. They strike a fine balance between product and culture. We're seeing that they prioritize a lot a leadership model that relies more on coaching rather than, vertically bossing people around. When they talk about growth, they mean growth and talent development, not necessarily a promotion-only scheme. They work a lot to generate a culture-driven organization. The majority of pacesetter CPG organizations are purpose-driven, and this is what connects them, because they're vast organizations and they're geographically all around the globe. So the only way that you can actually ensure that they are connected is through a strong culture that's prioritizing the impact that they want to bring. And they focus a lot on employee experience. Not that output is not important, but experience is the driving force that keeps the culture so vibrant as it is. Of course, and we always say that disclaimer, there is no one pacesetter organization to rule all systemic HR practices and has figured everything out. But through our GWI, through our work on the CPG industry, we were able to uncover some of the, let's say, pacesetter strategies of these organizations. For example, Tyson has an amazing story about around retention. They are exploring job sharing and flexible scheduling, even for frontline workers, which is something that you don't hear a lot. When you think about flexibility in terms of scheduling, you think of headquarters, you think of white collar jobs. You don't expect to find that on that level, even on the frontline workers. And one of my favorite things that Tyson as an organization does in terms of retention is how they help and they support the growth of their employees, and they finance their entire tuition fees. So anybody who can start from any job around the organization can have a full university scholarship and arrive when they get their degree to wherever their new specialization leads them. It is actually a matter of time, and it's like only stick around, continue your degree, and when you're done, you're actually going to be transferred to exactly what you studied, which is a fascinating end-to-end, deeply, let's say, thought through way to retain people by showcasing that benefits go beyond pay, and how you treat the entire employee experience and the flexibility actually pays dividends. L'Oreal is another organization that has some very prevalent, let's say, pacesetter practices. They continuously ensure that they are training their recruiters to be at their best selves as the conduits of the brand and what the company stands for. So they're not just training them in how to use systems and how to ensure that they're managing the life cycle and they're monitoring the KPIs, but they see them as, let's say, continuously the ambassadors of the company to the market. And at the same time, they're ensuring they have like, let's say they have a 360 view of learning, where they don't only train and upskill their employees or their colleagues in machine learning and in data-driven, or let's say next generation skills, but are also ensuring that they're training people who are not necessarily employed by L'Oreal. They're training young talent to ensure that they have the skills that the new world of work will need, and that they're ready for the future of work. So I hope you enjoyed the findings. Janet, I believe we can go on explaining a bit of our overarching and final remarks, and then we'll go ahead and open up to Q&A.
Sure. Thank you, Stella. No, that was fantastic. And what I love about this story and this report is really, truly, this industry reinvention, as you talked about, and this shift from product to consumer is driving this talent reinvention, right? And that HR in consumer packaged goods really needs to think through systemically what are the ways to tackle, using the data that's available, what are the ways to tackle the skills challenge and really create these consumer delight capabilities inside the organization. I love that. I'll just spend a couple of minutes kind of wrapping around what you shared with us today, and then we'll take a look at some of the questions that have come through either in the chat or elsewhere, because I know there's a couple that I want to pose to you as well. So just a couple of moments on, again, going back to the 4R model, Stella, and you talked a lot about it in the context of CPG. And I want to take a step back and also just share how we're thinking about these kind of interrelated, interconnected pieces of HR. And so we've done a fair bit of work now at Bersin to really look at the practices inside each of these. So we know that the connections exist. We know the implications when you pull on one lever or push on another. But for a lot of companies too, there really is a need to focus attention on one or more of these areas. To your point, there's no one company that has hit the mark on all of these, or there is no perfect here. So wanted to draw attention to the fact that each of these areas really does have particular practices, emerging people practices that drive impact, and that for most of our pace setters, our level 4, our North Star companies, the practices that matter most, the practices that are having the biggest impact are, in fact, as we're observing, interconnected systemic practices. So if you think about recruiting, it's really the connections back to the business. As you talked about at L'Oreal, the recruiters are being invested in. If we think about reskilling, they are very much about growth and development and tying back to, job design, and then that connects back to redesign. So these practices that matter the most across these functions really do reinforce the notion of systemic HR. You talked a little bit about it in the pace setters, and it's such an important theme that we are continuing to track, and it really is the need at the top of the organization to have that same systemic collaborative view. And we are really looking at, when we think about the CPG story, really thinking about this is not just a CHRO conversation now. Certainly the CHRO and the HR team is accountable for the people practices themselves. But when we think about the relationship between the CHRO and operations, right, and the COO, and providing that leadership for transformation, for process simplification, the connections back with the CFO and the investments that are required to upskill and reskill the organization and to find that talent inside the organization and outside. This is truly a C-suite collaboration to drive this transformation. And then maybe what I'll do is I'll leave us on this chart, and Stella, I want you to chime in here too. But one of the things that we really include in and we think about as we work through this industry research is, how do you bring this all to life, right? How do you operationalize talent intelligence? It's a big step for organizations. And so there's a fantastic set of steps that you've laid out in the report, Stella, and maybe you can take us through a couple of these steps now to really help the audience understand, how do you take a bite out of this apple? How do you get started?
For sure. And many organizations may be intimidated by the talent intelligence hypes. So it pays dividends if you know that actually you can run this type of analysis by following a series of distinct steps that will get you where you want to go, regardless of where you start. So first off, let's say that the first step, even before you start to think of what type of data do we have, what type of data do we need, where can we find the data, who will run the analysis, because these are some of the most common questions that pop into the, let's say, the collective mind of organizations where they start to discuss how to bring in talent intelligence, is to take a step back and first off, build a cross-functional center of excellence. Bring in let's say in a systemic and a holistic way, bring in people from across the organization that can actually tie in what is being done and contribute and chime in different parts of insights from throughout the organization, even within HR, but also from outside of the HR within the company. So bring in people, of course, from talent acquisition, from learning and development, from talent management, from organizational design, but also from finance, but also from sales, from marketing, people who can understand and bring in, especially in CPG, this is so crucial, who help forge the link that we're taking a holistic cross-functional approach to what we're going to solve. And the second step here is to identify what is it exactly the challenge that you're solving for, because there are so many ways and so many steps and so many challenges and problems and top of mind priorities that one can, let's say, try to boil the ocean through such an initiative. But if you saw, if you remember the slide where we had the different organizations that have implemented pacesetter CPG strategies, you will see that not all of them start from the same place. Some of them start from recruitment and move their way inwards. Some of them start from retention and move their way inwards. Some were focused more on reskilling and then have that affect the way that they approach the other quadrants. But focusing on the one entry point based on the most critical talent challenge to focus and prioritize is your next best bet. And of course, later on, you can do another team that focuses on another critical challenge, but it is crucial, especially if it's the first time round, trying to operationalize talent intelligence to identify the critical talent challenge to focus and start off with. And then this is where, after you've seen what problem you're solving for, this is where you go nerdy and you analyze the roles and the skills and the trends, and you do all types of charts. And at first they don't make sense, but then they start to do. And the more people that chime in and say, you know, what are we noticing here, the better it is. This is why it pays dividends to have a cross-functional team at the beginning, because now you have a different a set of different viewpoints when you actually look at the data from totally different or a big variety of points of view. And afterwards, this is where you start to work your way through solutions. You can use the 4R model. You can see, okay, which types of strategies work more for our organization based on the challenge that we're working on and the actual data that we have and what they're telling us. So should we be focusing more on, let's say, upskilling our people in data management, in R, in machine learning as a CPG organization? Do we need to ensure that while we're doing that, we're also, let's say, hiring for the warehousing roles that we may still need, but at the same time ensure that we are actually retaining the roles that are very critical to understanding and maintaining a fruitful relationship with our consumer? So this is where you start to see through the 4Rs what strategies work for your organization. There is no, let's say, there are a lot of good practices, but each solution should actually be tailored to the organization based on their data, based on their challenge and the organizational ecosystem. There is no one way to solve this.
And Stella, I would
Yes,
I would chime in there because I love that. And what's really important, and one of the things that we found, is that it also changes over time. So that real-time data and that real-time intelligence is so incredibly important because we know now that we are living in a world of nonstop disruption and external forces that are constantly changing. And so having that, you know, this is not a one and done approach. And I think that also sets apart, and I know there was a question in the chat around pace setters, you know, what sets them apart? And it is that constant, continuous focus and awareness of real-time intelligence. And so I wanted to chime in and add that.
100%. And this is exactly where it gets iterative, because you work your way through and you plan and you design. This is not actually a project. It's more of a process. It's a new capability of the organization that you bring in. It has a space. This is why we call it a center of excellence and not a talent intelligence project team, right? It's a center of excellence. So this is where you work your way through, you plan, you design, you develop, you test the waters, and then iteratively, continuously, you know, you measure what's happening and you iterate and you continuously improve and to your point, Janet, we have seen that pacesetter organizations do possess this unique skill, which allows them to be leaders at their market, which allows them to be employers of choice, which allows them to be awarded and acclaimed for their accomplishments, both as talent, let's say, leaders and market leaders.
Wonderful. Stella, thank you. Listen, I know we're almost out of time. I know we could talk about this for hours. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about the research that I wanted to hear your thoughts on. And as researchers, we always think about what's the finding that surprised us most, or what's the insight that really made us stop and think, what's going on here, and look under the hood a bit. For you, when you studied this industry and you spent a long time, really digging into the data, talking to organizations, what's the one, maybe two things that really stood out for you that you were surprised by, or really kind of just, made you stop and think and go, what's going on?
There were actually two things that really surprised me with the consumer packaged goods industry. The second one is how dynamic and how, let's say, how fluid the relationship with their consumer is, and how impacted consumer packaged goods organizations are by it. So you used to, let's say, as a CPG organization, you used to rely so much on your strong brand that many organizations didn't even consider that they have now competition. But now access to tech has actually given rise to so many CPG startups that are actually threatening, if I may use the word, let's say, this traditional status quo, or big CPG organizations that, let's say, no one is really safe from this. It's like it's not impacted because technology is not so expensive anymore. So CPG startups do have the ability to invest in biotechnology, in food science, in chemical analysis, in advanced statistical and predictive analytics and modeling. And they can actually offer products that are better, let's say, ease of adopting them and changing them based on what their consumers are telling them, because they have a direct relationship with them, because the majority of the CPG startups are sold via their e-shops. So you're seeing how it can get easily scaled up and easily disruptive in a very short time. And of course, the other thing that surprised me about the research, or I don't want to say surprised, but I really enjoyed, was that analysis of roles and skills. And when we saw the emphasis that pacesetter organizations are giving to getting the product right, and at the same time getting the right product to their consumers, that's unparalleled. That's like you have the powerhouse organization. If you can actually know that you're bringing in front of your consumer the right product at the right time, at the right price. And how do you base that? Do you base that on your strong branding? Not alone. You're also basing that on your solid research, your scientific footprint that's telling you that this is the right way to go. And this is, I think, a very strong message to CPG organizations nowadays, trying to, let's say, figure their way of, okay, everyone's talking about skills, right? Where do we start? Well, start from your R&D skills, start from your predictive analytics and your predictive modeling skills. This is where, let's say, the big money is looking ahead.
Fantastic. Well, and I think that's a great note to end on, Stella. We are at the top of the hour. This has been an incredible, kind of journey, I think, into the industry and the talent challenges. We've been studying CPG now for a long time, it feels like, and we know that we have observed certain things about the industry. Stella, what I might close on is also the cross-industry application here. And truly, I know we've got lots of CPG folks in the audience and maybe some who are from other industries. What we are uncovering as we continue to dig into individual industries, we've now done 3, as you mentioned, Stella: healthcare, consumer banking, and now consumer products, is truly the characteristics or the operating principles of these North Star companies across industries, the pace setters, as we call them. And so we have some research too, and we're kind of continuing to build on that to show what does market leadership look like inside an industry and across. And so this is one more piece of that puzzle, and I am thrilled that we were able to share it today with the group.
Likewise.
Well, thank you, everyone. I'm going to turn it back over to Callie to close us out.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you, Janet and Stella, for a great presentation. If you missed part of today's webinar or want to share with a colleague, the on-demand recording will be available through the link you used to log in today, and we will also have the on-demand recording available on Eightfold's website. Thank you again, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.